Yeah, hello. I'm on, Katie, I'm on. Well, we're glad that you could join us tonight. We are in Hosea, and we're all the way to chapter 2. So we're going to get started as soon as we have a word of prayer. So, would you pray with me, please? Father, we're grateful tonight that we can meet in your house. We're thankful for your word. And I pray that as we look at this book, that we would see the things that you want us to see, the things that perhaps we need to see, but overall that we might really draw the conclusion of your great love, how it never stops showing itself in all that you do to call us to yourself. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, Hosea chapter 2, God asks people to do odd things. And sometimes we just can't hardly believe that he's asked us to do that. I mean, it just seems beyond. I mean, for instance, for Ezekiel, excuse me, remember when he had to lay on his side for all those times? And then he had to build those little teeny houses, and he built a fortress, and he laid siege against it, and then he had to go through the area and preach without any clothes on, and he had to go and hide his underwear in a place far away. I mean, God asked him to do all kinds of things. God asks Hosea to marry a girl named Gomer. That in itself would be tough. I have a girl in mind, and don't pay any attention to how she looks. Just when you go into the group, say, hi, is your name Gomer? And when you find her, Mark? Ah. With the G being more of a ha than a ga. I like that. Yeah. Homer. Well, at least Jethro wouldn't come with it, so. Yeah, what's in the name? It was her propensity to one guy just wasn't enough for her. She had a very active lifestyle. And so God picked this union because he really wanted to demonstrate from a physical standpoint what was happening with Israel and with him. So we ended last week at verse 4. So this week, let's pick up verses 5 through 7. And Nicole, would you read that, please?
Yes, their mother is promiscuous. She conceived them and acted shamefully. For she thought, I will follow my lovers, the men who give me my food and water, my wool and flax, my oil and drink. Therefore, this is what I will do. I will block her way with thorns. I will enclose her with a wall so that she cannot find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but not catch them. She will look for them, but not find them. Then she will think, I will go back to my former husband, for then it was better for me than now.
In verse 5, God is explaining that part of her mindset is she's convinced that these other lovers are providing for her. And from a national standpoint, the children of Israel were actually convinced that it was so very important for them to continue going into these idol temples and doing these ungodly acts of worship, so that Baal and all those others would provide them with the rain when they should have it, and make their crops grow, and make their animals fertile, and blah, 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 blah. And so God's solution is in verses 6 and 7. And when you read that, what does it sound like to you that God is going to do?
Cage her up.
Cage her up. I like that.
Put barriers in her way?
Put barriers in her way. What were you going to say, Susie?
Well, I lose my thought that quick, so, oh, it looks like he's gonna make it impossible for her to get to those other gods or whatever she's looking for.
That is the bottom line. God is going to see to it, and it really doesn't take much. And God knows that, but when he's talking to Hosea, who's going to relate this to the nation, it sounds as if God is going to prevent her, and she's ingenious. You can't just lay down these boundaries and then expect her to abide by them, because she's had this addiction. She's had this belief system, and she's going to be very, very creative in how she's going to get to these lovers. Notice it says in verse 7, even though he's put this wall up, he's got this hedge, thorns, trying to prevent her. Notice in verse 7 it says, but she's going to keep pursuing, because that's what she does. What's going to happen, though, is there's going to be no satisfaction. It's an empty pursuit. And in his goal, God's goal, is what in verse 7?
To return to Hosea.
Yeah. She says, well, might as well go back home. That's going to really... Well, because she's reached a point where we're going to find out later on, but she's reached a point where she's not attractive anymore. So whatever she was thinking she could sell, no buyers. Just do. And so she's going to go back home where she can at least have a place to sleep and food to eat. So, Julie, would you read verse 8?
For she does not know that it the new wine and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal.
When Hosea is talking to Israel, the northern tribes now, they've reached a state where they are so spiritually ignorant. They're not even aware that it's Jehovah that provides these things. They have totally believed the lie that these idols are what makes their world. And it seems crazy, doesn't it? That you could believe that?
And it's interesting that Baal is also a word that means husband. And so you get this great irony here that they're worshiping Baal, but I'm the Baal. They don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of their spiritual ignorance, Satan has them believing a lie, and they've fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. In our country today, we have such a lack of spiritual knowledge that we are rapidly reaching a point where we don't know what's male and what's female. I mean, we have a Supreme Court justice that cannot define a woman. And that's the highest court in America. You would think someone that was able to reach that level with an education would know what a woman is.
Just like the Israelites, they knew God's commands, the law, but they didn't want to obey it, so they pretended like it didn't exist. And that's what we're doing in America. We're pretending that there's more than two sexes because that's what they want to believe. They know better, but they won't admit it.
Well, that's a very interesting concept, and I would applaud that, hoping that that was in reality a truth. But when I talk to people and I listen to people talk, I'm becoming more and more convinced that these people actually believe what it is that they're saying, and they don't know.
The teacher tells you that, you're going to believe it. So the younger ones really believe that because it's being taught that in college and everywhere else. But the older ones, they know better. You know, I mean, people our age know better. But they're still saying it because they want it to be that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that goes way out of my comfort zone, because I don't know what people, what's in their heart. But Chuck Schumer has introduced this latest bill. It's called the Marriage Equality Act, and it's not anything close to that. Their goal is to destroy marriage, and the way he's going to do that is this bill is designed so that even if one state decides that this is okay to do, all 49 states and the Supreme Court have to agree to it. And the test case is in California right now, where there is a 14-year-old whose father wants to marry her. And once that becomes law, then every state will have to acknowledge that marriage between a parent and a child is legal. See, they're extremely crafty in the sins they want to commit. And this is God. He said he doesn't know because they're confused about Baal. God says, I'm the husband. I'm the husband. And so what I'm going to do, Julie, read verse 9.
Therefore, I will take back my grain at harvest time and my new wine in its season. I will also take away my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness.
In that verse 9, what pronoun is he using? Who owns those things? God. God says they're mine. You don't have any. You've planted the fields, but what's growing up there, it's not yours. I got news for you. It's mine. It's all mine. And I think I'll just take it away. Julie, verse 10. And 11.
Put an end to all her gaiety, her feasts, her new moons, her Sabbaths, and all her festal assemblies.
The interesting thing about Israel at this time from Jeroboam as Hosea comes in, this was one of the most prosperous times, materially speaking, since the days of Solomon. Israel was just enjoying a tremendous upsurge in profitability. Everybody was enjoying that. And God says, you know, if I take this stuff away, all these nations around you, they're not going to think you're such a prize. And when they don't want you, then what are you going to do? We have this tendency to believe that what we are enjoying is never going to end. And and it could end in November for a lot of people. And it won't end soon enough for some. But it's going to end. My goodness. People die. And people don't always live long. You know, Olivia Newton-John, 73. That's not very far away. I'm thinking to myself, wow, I didn't realize she was that old. I thought she was younger than that. But 73, mercy. We're all going to do that. And so God goes on, and in verses 12 and 13, read that, Julie, and then I'll quit picking on you.
I will destroy her vines and fig trees, of which she said, these are my wages, which my lovers have given me, and I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field will devour them. I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she used to offer sacrifices to them, and adorn herself with her earrings and jewelry, and follow her lovers, so that she forgot me, declares the Lord.
There are at least 4 things here that in her pursuit of Baal, God is going to change. And one of the first things that he mentions that she did in verse 13, what did she do in her pursuit of Baal?
Burned incense.
Burned incense to this fertility deity. And then the second thing?
Decked herself with rings and jewelry.
Yes.
And went at lovers.
She had, and I didn't realize this till I was in my study, but nose rings were a real thing way back then. I thought that was new. Duh, I'm from Vesterburg. we had nose rings in Vesterburg, but it was only males that had them. We had a nose ring on every single bull. Yeah. Boy, oh boy, and all Grandpa would have to do is we would lure him over to a stanchion and close that. Then he'd slip this a rope through that ring. And it didn't matter how ferocious that bull thought he was. And he was just docile. Where would you like me to go? I always thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, because I'd seen this bull out and about, and he was really a bully. Get it? Bully. Yeah, and then Grandpa would lure him in, slap that stanchion together, put that ring, that rope through his nose, let him loose, and he was just like Ferdinand. Wherever you want me to go, just, give me some flowers and I'll be a good boy. And so these nose rings, they had earrings, nose rings, and third, what did she do?
Follow her lovers.
Went after her lovers. And then the fourth thing, in her zeal to pursue this worship of Baal, what did she do?
She forgot the Lord.
She forgot God. So, it's time for God to just cut the rope, let the anchor go, save yourself, start over, right? Isn't that how God does it? No. This is just unbelievable. Let's have Renee, would you read 14 through 17?
Therefore, I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the desert and speak tenderly to her. There I will give her back her vineyards, and I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope. There she will sing as in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband. You will no longer call me my master. I will remove the names of the Baals from her lips. No longer will their names be invoked. In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the creatures that move along the ground. Bow and sword and battle I will abolish from the land, so that all may lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion.
You might as well read 20.
Okay. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord.
Very good. I mean, Israel was just ugly. And what they were doing to God is unfathomable. I mean, God said they forgot me. That's what he said. They forgot me. But notice what he does beginning in verse 14. And here, he's going to use a mental picture for us as the readers. And he takes us back to yesteryear. I mean, we're going way back. And the children of Israel were in a land called Egypt. and they were in a bad way. Many of them didn't know God. 450 years of silence. God hadn't forgotten them, but they'd forgotten him. So he gathers this group of people, turns their life into a living brick kiln. That's a pretty good way to say it, isn't it? Because it was hot. And they want to leave. And all of a sudden they remember from way back, we had a God our father Abraham talked about. So he comes and he rescues them, and the first thing when he delivered them from Egypt is he took them where? Yeah, the wilderness. You see that in verse 14? I'm going to allure her. I'm going to woo her. I'm going to court her. And if you ever want to take your gal on a hot date so she's going to fall in love with you like that, take her to the wilderness. Nothing else to do. She's right there. And then when she was in that wilderness, she couldn't do anything else but depend on God because she had nothing. They hadn't food, they hadn't any water. And God was with them the whole way. So, leading Israel into the desert wasn't a punishment, it was a redemption. And God says that he's going to take his bride back to the old honeymoon grounds and rekindle this. And here in verse 14, he's using an example. He wants them to think about when God rescued them from Egypt. But it's present day. I mean, this is Hosea speaking to people. Because he's taking this Israel and going to allure her. Not the one from Exodus. He's going to take this one that's right there living in the land of Israel, the northern tribes. He's going to take that group and he's going to allure her in like he did in the wilderness by making her dependent upon him. And the response is going to be that she's going to start singing. I don't know what kind of voice she had, but she's going to start singing. And I love this about the valley of Achor. They've spent 40 years and they've come to the Jordan and they're going to cross and they go to Gilgal and they set up camp. And there's the first city that they're approaching that they need to conquer to start getting their feet cemented into the land was the city of what?
Jericho.
The city of Jericho. And God says, I'm going to give you that city. And all you got to do is walk. One time around the city, for 6 days, seventh day, 7 times. And on the 7th time, I've got this ingenious method of warfare. Nobody's ever seen it before. All together now, I want you to shout. Wow. That's going to kill them. The walls fall out. Israel goes in, and they win that battle. And they're thinking to themselves, this is so simple. Our God is like a master military strategist. And so they come up to the next place. It was called Ai. It was small. And they said to Josh, let's not take everybody up there and walk again. Some of us still got blisters. I mean, it's hot out. We don't want to have to do all this. Just send a few, the ones that are really into this war stuff. And the rest of us will sit back. So they go up to Ai, and how'd that turn out? Oh, they lost big time. And they started crying and mourning, and God, what is wrong? And God says, I'm not going to bless you when there's sin in the camp. And what was the sin? A man by the name of Achan. He'd taken some gold, some silver, and a blanket. Dug a hole, had it in his tent. How'd they find out? God told them, but they did something that it just seems so incredible to us. They cast lots. And they kept narrowing it down, this part and this tribe and this family and this guy and this family. It was a place of judgment, a place of death. But you see, our God can turn a place of judgment into hope, and he's the only one that can do that. Our God can turn the valley of Achor into a door of hope. We can't. Only God can take a place of death and turn it into a place of hope. Only God can take the cross Sunday, a fella come up to me. Sometimes I don't think any of you guys listen to anything I say. I don't even remember the sermon, but the guy starts out by saying, do you remember the sermon you preached, and you talked about the method of death, and you compared a cross to an electric chair, and you said, we wear these crosses around our neck, and we're so bold about it, but how many of us would want to wear an electric chair around our necks, a little miniature? And he said, I have told more people about that. And everybody listens then when I talk about our instrument of salvation when the electric chair was the cross. And he said, do you remember that? I said, no. An instrument of death, and God can turn it into an icon of hope. He can take Golgotha, turn it into a place of redemption. He can take a tomb and turn it into a place of life. God can do that. And so this Achor, this becomes a door of hope. And then God says, when I come, that Ishi is another word for husband, right? Yeah. And no longer are you going to call me Bailey.
Excuse me?
And no longer will you call me Bailey.
Right.
So 2 words for husband.
Yeah.
And you're not going to call me this other one because you get confused when you do that. You forget who you're talking to. So you're going to call me Ishi. How you pronounce it?
Ishi.
That's what I said.
Ishi rhymes with squishy.
Squishy. Ishi, squishy. And when you call me that, I'm going to take all those nasty names of all those other gods and just remove them from your lips. That is, in our terminology today, what? When God takes our past, when God takes all those bad names from our lips, when God takes all of that wickedness and transforms us. What do we call it? Repentance is a good word. What else do we call it?
Salvation.
We call it salvation. What else do we call it? Redemption. Anything else? Reborn. Forgiveness. Yeah. Newness of life. Wow. A brand new start. And here, notice in 18, now that's kind of weird, isn't it? He's going to make a covenant. He's going to make a covenant for who?
The animals.
The animals. Oh, if we would only read God's word, we wouldn't have to have a green earth movement. Our God is already about the green earth. We wouldn't have to have PETA. God cares about animals. All we need is God. We don't need all these other things. But we have all these other things because we think God needs our help. In fact, one of the things that I struggle with and have for a long time, and I try to stop doing this. When I pray, when you pray, how many of you ever use the word help when you pray? Lord, help me. Lord, help this. Lord, how many? Because I do. I do it all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, as soon as those words come out of my mouth, Bruce, what did you just say? Yeah. Help? Are you kidding me? God, help? I don't think it's okay to do that.
But God has called our helper in the scriptures, and you get requests in the Psalms to help.
I think it's something that needs to get washed right out of my mouth.
I think it's biblical.
because we don't help God. We don't help God. Help me.
Asking him to help you. You need him. You're not saying, I'm going to help you, God, do this.
I'm saying, we're going to do this together, God. No, we're not. God's going to do it. I'm just an innocent bystander.
Maybe,
Go ahead.
maybe this is an attitudinal thing. Because when I listen to Lee talk about
Sounds
asking
intelligent.
God for help,
Yeah.
we ask God for help because we can't do it.
Right.
If that's the attitude,
That's
then there's
right.
nothing wrong with it. If the attitude is, God, I'm going to do this, would you kind of lend a hand here?
Yeah, yeah.
That's another attitude. That's the one you don't want.
I have another illustration.
Okay.
Let's suppose I have to walk from point A to point B. But the path from point A to point B is dark and lonely, and on the side, I know that there are people who would rob me and shoot me and kill me in a minute.
Yeah.
So, what I do, because I'm smart,
Uh-huh.
is I want somebody to go with me.
Yeah.
Are you going to invite me, or are you going to invite Bruce? You're going to ask Bruce to go with you because he's strong and mighty. You're not going to ask someone like me. That's what this request is for the Lord as helper.
Yeah. But see, I'm not asking God to help me go through there. I'm asking God to go with me.
And he's saying we'll go together.
Yeah.
But
I'm not carrying you, Bruce.
It's biblical.
You've got to walk on yourself, on your own. No, your ankle's fine. Okay.
As long as we're stopped, anyway.
Yeah.
Can I go back to the question about when this is going to happen with Israel?
Sure.
Because this is really interesting to me. Isaiah, of course, was a younger contemporary of Hosea's. And in chapter 11, after he's been talking about all of these things that are going to happen, when he writes this, he says, 11 verse 12, he says, he will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the banished of Israel, so they're already off at this point, and gather the dispersed of Judah, because that's what's coming in the future for Judah, from the four corners of the earth. So he's already saying, I'm going to rejoin these people. And then 150 years later, Jeremiah says the same thing several times. In Jeremiah 3:11, the Lord said to me, faithless Israel has shown herself more righteous than treacherous Judah. And so he says, go and proclaim these words toward the north and say, return, faithless Israel. I will not look on you in anger, for I am merciful. And so it's this calling back. And then that brings me to the verse we just read about the animals. What do you think of this? I haven't thought this all the way through. What do you think of this? Judah represents Judah in Hosea. Israel represents Israel. And God's not going to reconstitute Israel as a nation, but he's going to reconstitute them together as a people.
Yeah.
And the animals represent Gentiles.
Ooh.
Well, they did call them dogs.
Dr. James E. Smith, are you familiar with him?
I am. I've never met him, but I'm
Yeah.
familiar.
He says that this bringing the animals in, because he's talking about, and I didn't want to get there because I still want to cover chapter 11 later, but you know, you ruined that.
Are we talking about Isaiah 11, or are we talking about Hosea?
We're talking about Hosea
11.
11.
Oh, okay.
So he's jumps way ahead.
Okay. Well, I thought he
Because
jumped
I go
way back.
slow and he's fast, and he just reads the whole time I'm talking. So what Dr. Smith says about this is what he's talking about here, the restoration of Israel, is he's talking about when the Messiah comes in his kingdom. And the idea of the animals in there is a concept of peace. When the kingdom comes, when Messiah appears, there will be a peace that passeth understanding. He's not talking about absence of war. He's talking about absence of conflict within our souls. Because there's no way that when the Messiah showed up, there was peace in the valley. Try to explain that to all of those Christians that got hauled off to the Colosseum, burned in Herod's gardens and all. That's not the peace he's talking about. It's the peace that those people could feel even under persecution. And that's what he's getting at. And I will betroth you to me forever. Oh, forever. There's going to be no time when we're not going to be with the Lord. Isn't that going to be great? Ah, nothing that can separate us from the love of Christ. Yes. In fact, I was really baffled when I started studying from this part. According to Assyrian records, only less than 28,000 Israelites were hauled away by the Assyrians. So we talk about those 10 lost tribes. There was less than 28,000. A ton of the northern kingdom inhabitants raced to the south. and were there then in Judah. The Assyrians did take that 28,000 away, but they also introduced other peoples into northern kingdom. And from there, we had the intermarriage, and that's where the Samaritans show up. But to say that there are 10 lost tribes, they weren't really lost. And they're all coming back together. In fact, when Joseph and Mary went to present baby Jesus in the temple, the lady that was there praying, Anna, she was from the tribe of Asher. What? I thought they were lost. You know, in AD 1649, now this isn't Bible, this is all extra stuff. This is free. 1649, John Sadler advanced the theory that the Anglo-Saxons of Great Britain were really the 10 northern tribes of Israel. And well, they really weren't a people until they got to Great Britain, and then they all just said, hey, let's, Israelites is a bad name, so let's just call ourselves Anglo-Saxons. And then a guy in 1757, he kind of liked that, so he worked on it a little bit, and then Herbert W. Armstrong of the Worldwide Church of God, he comes along and he said, that's exactly what happened. In fact, the throne of England is secretly the throne of David. And the stone upon which the queen was crowned it was from the pillar of Jacob in Genesis chapter 28. And and then the Mormons, they said, well, no, what happened is during the reign of King Zedekiah, a man named Lehi, together with his companion Ishmael, they left Jerusalem because they could see that things were turning out bad, and they sailed to America. And they had a boy named Mulek, and he joined Lehi, and the two groups combined to form a great nation, and their descendants were called the American Indians. And the Mormons teach that when the restoration of the 10 tribes occur in Zion, which is the New Jerusalem built on American soil, then Jesus is going to come back to earth, and that's where he's going to reign from America. He's going to reign from America. Well, yes. Yeah. Oh, man. They're funny.
Ish, meaning covenant man.
It would have had to have been Herbert W. Armstrong, because the Mormons, they're all about
The new world.
this America and the American Indians. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's get back to the...
Let's get back to seriousness. Oh, yeah. Susie says, come on, let's get off of this. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, for confirming. It's okay. Let's go and, Chuck, would you read verses 21 through 23?
It will come about in that day that I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the heavens, and they will respond to the earth, and the earth will respond to the grain, to the new wine, and to the oil, and they will respond to Jezreel. I will sow her for myself in the land. I will also have compassion on her, who had not obtained compassion. And I will say to those who are not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God.
All right. Chapter 3. 9 minutes, we can do it. Chapter 3. Oh, yeah, this is simple. You ready, Susie? Would you read chapter 3?
The Lord said to me, go show your love to your wife again, though she is loved by another and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. Then I told her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will live with you. For the Israelites will live many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or idol. Afterward, the Israelites will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days.
Wow. Look at verse 1. Look at verse 2. Depending on if we use Mark's idea, he's going to buy Homer for a Homer. And if we don't, he's going to buy Gomer for a Homer. You gotta love the language. Going to buy Gomer for a Homer, or Homer for a Homer. The Lord said go, and I think that what he meant was go. I don't think he meant, let's sit around and think about it. Let's weigh our options, pros, cons. Apparently, she had left again. I mean, God wooed her back and got back home because she had no place else to go, and now she's gone again. But this time, things got so bad that she's selling herself, not for tricks. She's selling herself for food. She has reached the lowest end, and she's turned into a slave. And God says, I want you to go find her, your wife. She's on the auction block, and I want you to buy her. Are you kidding me? He was married to her. So he shows up. See, he shows up at the auction, and he goes to the guy that's, he's opened her mouth and pulled her lips back and said, look at her teeth, they're still all there, and grabs a hold of her arms and said she's strong enough, to do manual labor. And he said, what do you want for her? And Hosea shows up and he says, that's my wife. I want her back. How much you willing to pay? Well, I don't have to pay. She's my wife. Oh, yeah. Yeah, when she's on that platform, she's not your wife. She's my property, and you got to pay. Can you imagine? And look at verse 1 of chapter 3. They don't love God because they love what instead? Look at
The false gods.
raisin cakes.
Sacred raisin cakes.
They cannot get enough raisin cakes. Yes, the raisin cakes were a special offering to Mesopotamian gods. Yeah, you're just not going to see this. Yeah, how about macadamia nuts?
Oh, maybe.
Say, oh yeah, let's stick them in some cake. Raisin cakes. Talk about, the people love raisin cakes instead of loving God. Isn't that unfathomable? Well then, what's the raisin cakes that we love instead of God today?
All that stuff.
Sports, money,
Hunting?
What was that?
Oh, ouch.
What was that?
when were you moving?
He's leaving Michigan, you can tell.
Oh, that's great, yeah. There are people who would rather watch television than come to church. Can you believe that? And I mean, I'm old. And so the big deal in my home church was we cannot go to church on Sunday night because we want to sit home as a family. There is a family a show that we watch as a family, and we're not missing it for church. The Wonderful World of Disney. Now, I was just a kid. And adults would tell me that, and I would say, and probably this is why I'll never get asked to preach at that church again, you would rather stay home and watch television than go to church and listen to God's word being preached? Oh yeah, because Walt Disney is a lot more entertaining than our preacher. And I love that man. Well, really, I had a crush on his daughter, but I couldn't believe it. We cannot come to church because the Wonderful World of Disney. And you see, Bruce, before you judge us, this is family time. And we're all together as a family. I said, you can come together as a family at church because we didn't have youth groups and children's. We all sat together as a family. Raisin cakes. And boy, those people must be so proud today to have given so much time to Walt Disney. Because that's somebody that is worth emulating, isn't it? No. Yeah, not his. Okay, I'm going to quit right there because I've dug myself a hole and I'm going to go hunting. I love raisins. Oh, rum-soaked raisins. Soak them in enough rum.
Oh,